My KSR shirt, actually.
There you go. And all right. And now I'd like to welcome on he owns his own company now. He's doing his own thing. Aaron Torres Media. He runs one of the best college basketball podcasts there is out there. It's our good buddy, Aaron Torres. How are we doing today?
I know. I'm a busy businessman. I had important business meetings to tend to earlier today. But no, I'm just teasing. Yes, I started my own business probably since the last time I came on, and I basically do the exact same thing. It's just, just my name's on all of it, and I don't really have a boss, so I just do whatever I want all the time. So what's going on, guys? How we doing? It's not, it's nice to join a podcast. Sam, you and I, we've always had the, last year was tough, but
yeah,
we've always been able to kind of, we always knew Kentucky would figure it out. But the fact that Indiana is starting to figure it out, our boy Mike Woodson, I never had a doubt. Okay, I had a big doubt for a long time there.
Yes.
But then I didn't have a doubt. And it is nice to see, man. I know you guys are right there in Bloomington, and I know how important the program is to the community. Obviously I joined your spaces after the Wisconsin game when it started to look like, is this just going to be the Archie Miller era all over again? So it's been nice to watch the Purdue win, the Maryland win on the road this past weekend. It's nice to see this program hopefully starting to turn a corner a little bit.
Sam, have you told them about your power that you have? Like
I have a superpower. Okay. But IU fans hate me. That's a known fact. They hate me because I run this podcast. It's on a bunch of, IU sponsored networks, and I'm the Kentucky guy that kills their dreams. But
for sure,
every IU game I've been to since my freshman year, and obviously we took the off year with COVID and everything, but I've been to big games where they were underdogs in almost all of them. They've won every single time I go. I think with 10-0 maybe. I want to say that is the stat, and I will solely put my reputation on it that I am the reason that they win these games. I didn't go to the Michigan game.
You did not?
Yeah, I did not go to that Michigan game, the Purdue hangover game, but I was at the Purdue game. And
you're at Notre Dame game. I know that.
I was at the Notre Dame. Yes, and that wasn't even an assembly. So it travels.
That's looking like a big win now all of a sudden. Especially if Notre Dame, I don't know if they're going to win tonight, but
yeah, we're recording this on Monday night. They do play Duke tonight at Notre Dame. Look, now that when Kentucky lost at Notre Dame, it looked a lot worse than it does now. That's like a quad one loss now, I believe. So that's actually pretty huge. But I have a superpower. We're getting a lot of snow up here. Torres, I know you don't know a lot about that anymore out on the West Coast, whatever. But it's going to be tough for me to get to that Illinois game. And I know the Bloomington is going to be begging me to go. So I'm going to have to make a decision.
I just appreciate you taking the heat off me, because last time I came on the podcast, Connor was blaming me for Indiana's awful football season. So I guess you've kind of saved my bacon a little bit there in Bloomington, because I have nothing to do with wins and losses in basketball, but I guess in football I was really a bad luck charm. So I appreciate you getting that squared away for me.
Let me say this.
He remembered that.
Let me say this. So yesterday,
I remember all my slights, like
yesterday,
Michael Jordan. But anyway,
you tweeted about in the Bengals Chiefs game. Not to bring it up, I know.
Oh, I don't care about that.
But Brant, who
Brant coming after me. Yeah, what was that about?
No. Brant loved it.
Oh, did
because he's a Bengals fan.
Oh,
so this was like, he was like, thanks. He was like, this is great.
It was a little reverse psychology. We were all rooting for the Bengals. Well, I will say, so first of all, you're welcome, Brant. If you're listening, not a problem. Happy to help. Brant's helped me quite a bit, so it's the least I can do is get his team to the Super Bowl. But yeah, no, I mean, I did tweet in the middle of the game that the game was over. And I still think if they, if the Chiefs hadn't gotten stopped on the 1 yard line with time to kick a field goal, 13 seconds left, ironically enough, I think they probably would have won that game. But yeah, I'm excited. You guys excited for the Super Bowl? I mean, I'm pretty fired up for this one. I live in LA. I wish I could say I'm going. I'm not going, but it should be a fun game, right? We like Joe Burrow. Can I say this one thing really quick?
Yeah, go.
I love Joe Burrow. The defense won that game yesterday. Like
100%.
Yeah, and by the way, they won the Tennessee game too.
Yeah,
3 interceptions.
They won they had the game-winning pick against the Raiders too. Let's not forget.
Yeah, like listen. The Joe Burrow story is great, and we all saw he's smoking a cigar and he's doing the locker room dance and he's so cool and he's whatever. It's like, and he made a lot of big throws, but like it is one of those like sports narratives that it's just like everybody wants to like. It's one of those like social media, like everyone wants to one up everybody about how much they like Joe Burrow and how funny can my Joe Burrow meme be, and let me show you how much more I love Joe Burrow than I do. And it's like, I mean, we all love Joe Burrow, but like, come on now. Like, it was the defense. It was the interception in overtime. It was the interception that set up basically a gimme touchdown. As you said, it was the interception to set up the Raiders win. It was 3 interceptions against Tannehill. So, I mean, I have no skin in the game. I don't really care. I mean, apparently I saved the Bengals season, but it's not really Joe Burrow. Like, it's not that it's not Joe Burrow, but it's more the defense than it is Joe Burrow.
No, Los Angeles. You live in LA. They don't care about football. San Francisco packed the building last night. No?
Well, that's not true. I mean, it's not true. First of all, San Francisco filled the building 2 weeks ago in Dallas at the Cowboys Stadium.
That is true.
There was like an insane amount of red in that stadium on Sunday. I'm not going to lie about that. I will say, and I've said this on my podcast, like when USC fired Clay Helton, and they obviously got a great hire in Lincoln Riley, but the opening night of SoFi Stadium, I went to that game. They played the Bears on a Sunday night. It was the first week of the season. And I was blown away by how much people in LA love the Rams. Like, I didn't think it was really a thing. People in LA really love the Rams. Now, they didn't love them enough to not sell their tickets to 49ers fans this weekend and make 4 times the profit on them. Yep. But the Rams are bigger in LA than I expected. And one thing I did talk about on my podcast on, I guess it would have been Monday, I love the kind of go for it, push all the chips in the middle attitude that the Rams have. I just think in pro sports these days, it's like, how many teams have we seen that you think the window's forever and then it closes before it's even open? I think about the NBA where, we thought Kyrie, James Harden, and KD were going to run the league forever. Now, who knows how many games, they might end up playing like less than probably 30 or 40 games together. So I love that the Rams went for it. It's really cool. I don't know that, I don't know what the city will be like if they win the Super Bowl or whatever. But I will say people do like the Rams here more than I thought they did.
Well, that's good. I think it's the Chargers that get the biggest slate. Yeah, after they went. Yeah, we won't talk too much about it. I just wish the Colts would kind of start to. I wish they would go all in. Maybe they'd be here next year.
Well, yeah. First of all, I will say, we all have our sports predictions, and I get a lot of stuff wrong. But I remember being in, at the time, foxsports.com. I was working there when there was still a website, being in the quote-unquote newsroom the day they announced they're moving to L.A. I'm like, this is going to be a freaking disaster. Like, first of all, for people who don't know, they completely alienated the whole fan base in San Diego. Everybody in San Diego, I don't want to say hates the franchise, but they hate the ownership. So you have that aspect of it. Everybody in LA basically comes from somewhere else, so they already have a team. You grew up in Pittsburgh, you're a Steelers fan, your parents are Steelers fans, Packers fans, 49ers fans, whatever. And then there was another team that came here a year before, so if somebody didn't have a team, they just became a Rams fan. And so it's been a disaster. I mean, I do know people that have kind of bought tickets and all that stuff. I will say, sick brag on my part, that isn't intended, but for Fox Sports Radio today, I did interview Justin Herbert. So if you're up at Saturday night, Torres and Herbert, we're taking over the airwaves about 10 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, so you can check that out. But yeah, man, it's a fun time, man. It's good to talk some football with you guys.
Hell
Colts,
yeah.
I don't know about. Colts, not so much. I don't really have many Colts hot takes, so sorry about that.
There's nothing.
I shouldn't have brought it up. Me and Connor could go on all day about it. But we do have some basketball to talk about.
A lot of good UConn players formerly of the Colts. Donald Brown, Darius Butler, who's a good friend of mine. A lot of good former UConn players playing for the Colts.
Future DC, Darius Butler.
God.
So what was that? Did that become a social media thing? Because I saw him talking about it on Pat McAfee, and I was a little confused.
Interest is all from him.
Oh, okay.
This quote unquote insider on Twitter basically. Darius Butler tweeted that he wanted to be like the DC, like he'll do it. And the one guy basically tweeted like, these players don't know what it takes to be a DC and how much time it takes. They don't know what it entails. That's why people usually like go from DC to position coach because they can't handle it. And like Darius took offense to it, and I think he went on Pat McAfee's show. And
that's funny. Well, when the UConn job was open, yeah, well, I do too. I did a panel with him about maybe 6 months ago because a UConn alumni panel. And we were DMing when the UConn job opened up, and I tried to convince him to apply for the UConn job. He wasn't interested in that. But so yeah, if he goes to the NFL, that'd be cool. I'd kind of know somebody that kind of sort of knows me that probably would forget who I was 2 minutes after he took the job, but that'd be pretty cool. So all of a sudden you start seeing, you start reading Torres just breaking Colts stories. You know where they come from. Oh, strife in the locker room. The locker room is turned on Carson Wentz. Now you know where it came from. So.
Well, yeah, Torres would he would be the number one go-to for all things Indiana. He'd be the Mike Woodson guy. He'd be the Colts guy. He'd be everything.
What it really would be was I would just start leaking negative reports about the Colts to turn the whole fan base's attention to Indiana basketball. That's actually why I did Indiana football during the football season. Yes. You guys don't know that, but that is actually why I did it. It was just to turn everybody and get their focus on basketball where it should be.
It's good marketing. That's good marketing.
Yeah. There you go.
Right, man.
There you go. All right.
All right, we talking basketball or what? What are we doing here?
Now we're talking basketball. We went on the little introduction about football. Hey, it's Super Bowl is a couple weekends away. We might as
sure.
There was a Super Bowl from one fan base on Saturday.
Oh, okay. That's a good segue. That's good. That's professional.
Yeah. I just had to think about it. Kentucky went into Fog Allen, and they kicked some ass.
They did. Yes.
Look, I know I've been high on Kentucky all year. I haven't wavered. I know you haven't wavered either. There's been some people that have written them off. Some people have put them low. Like I'm not naming names, but Jeff Goodman put him in like low 20s at one point. No big deal or anything. But does this game signify just a completely different ceiling than we saw before in your eyes for the Kentucky Wildcats?
I think to people that haven't paid attention, I do think it does. I have a funny story about that. I'll tell you off air, something else related to what you just said a little bit, but
not naming names yet.
No. I can't say it now. But no, so what I would say is I really felt like so I said the day I said it was when Kentucky played Missouri, it was before the new year. It was the first SEC game. And I said I believe that it was the first time of the Calipari era that Kentucky was underrated going into league play and going into the new year. And I have a lot of different I have fans from all over the country. I'm fortunate, I have a moderately big social media following. And I had, Tennessee fans, Auburn fans, whoever. Oh, they haven't played anybody and they haven't this and they haven't that. And so I really thought with Kentucky, it was kind of like a chicken and the egg thing of when I would say I think they're underrated, people would say, well, they haven't played anybody. And what I would say was, because they didn't have that signature win, that's why I believe that they were underrated. Because once they get that signature win, then you can't sit there and say, well, they haven't played anybody, they haven't beaten anybody. And so, Sam, I know you follow the team, you're watching all the games, but first of all, they destroyed North Carolina, they destroyed Tennessee. Now, those are fringe top 25-ish type teams. Those aren't the kind of wins that are going to move the needle. But I bring it up because they played at LSU when LSU was at full strength, top 15 team in the country. Had a chance to win that game. Two major injuries. Severe Wheeler misses the entire game. Ty Washington misses the second half. Okay, well, they're not going to win that one. Then they go to Auburn. They're in complete control early. Ty Washington goes down. Severe Wheeler goes down. And Severe Wheeler came back in that one. So I just bring it up to say every time that an outside observer or an inside, anyone that watches Kentucky, anytime that they were on the brink of that game that would prove that they are back, that they are who they expect to be, which is a national championship contender annually. Every time that happened, something came up, an injury, a twisted ankle, a hard screen, whatever. And so I do think Saturday changed the perception from the outside where Kansas has its problems, Kansas has its flaws, but I don't think that you can come out of that game and say anything other than this is at worst full strength, one of the 5 to 7 best teams in the country. And if you're one of the 5 to 7 best teams in the country, except maybe in a year like last year where 1 or 2 teams were so much better than everybody else, I don't think you can sit there and say that this team can't win it all, because this is a fun year in college basketball, but it's not as though all those teams at the top don't have flaws. Arizona just lost to UCLA last week, struggled the follow-up game against Arizona State. Gonzaga, we saw them early. What's going to happen once they got back out of WCC play? Duke, I like. They're playing right now. For all we know, they could take another loss before we're done with this podcast. So I don't think you can watch that game and be unbiased and say, you know what? I'm not saying they'd be favored against everybody, but there's not a team that you go into saying they have no shot against. And I think that's how you have to perceive it with Kentucky after Saturday.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there is some type of hesitancy to get behind this Kentucky program from a national standpoint. It's a completely, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate, but it's a completely different Cal team. Experienced guys, not really.
That should make it easier to get behind them, though. Like, that's
right.
what I don't get. Pete, like,
Right.
I had somebody like, oh, are you surprised that this transfer stuff worked out? And I'm like, no. If Calipari can turn Tyler Hero from literally unplayable to one of the 4 or 5 best players in the country by the end of the year, and people forget, you remember, Sam, he was unplayable the first month, 6 weeks of the season. Couldn't defend, couldn't make an open jumper, whatever. So I'm like, okay, you're going to bring in guys now that maybe don't have the ceiling of a Tyler Hero, the ceiling of a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the ceiling of whoever, but the floor that you're starting with is a lot higher. So
right.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but like,
no, you're good.
I'm really not surprised. And it's funny, I was even thinking about this today, is that I remember back to the summer when there was talk about bringing in Kofi Cockburn. And, I believe, and I've heard other people in the media, we've talked about this guy, Jack Pilgrim. I respect the hell out of him. He might have been on your show, but I heard Jack say during the summer that, his belief was that if Kentucky wanted Kofi Cockburn, Kentucky could have had Kofi Cockburn. But I bring it up because I remember during the summer, and I was thinking about this recently, about there were people that were like, well, we just blew our national championship winner. We went from pretty good. We would have been the definitive this, the definitive that. And I was thinking about that this week, is like, what would Oscar Tshiebwe be if Kofi Cockburn was on this team right now? And they'd both be really good, but neither would be what they are right now. And so I just bring it up because I never believed that the ceiling was as low as everybody else did. Where I remember that people were like, well, we can't win a national championship now. I'm like, why the heck not? Severe Wheeler's awesome. Kellen Grady's awesome. Oscar Tshiebwe is awesome. Yeah. And do you need another 7'1" guy that can't play more than 2 feet from the basket? So I don't even remember what your question was, but I don't know, man. Go ahead, Sam. Go ahead.
No, you're all good. No, I was talking about that in an earlier episode, like hindsight being 2020. That decision to not bring whatever it was, I don't know, from Kentucky insiders, it was a decision on Kentucky's point. But that decision really would have changed Oscar so much. This guy is now a National Player of the Year candidate. We'll get to that later. But he's playing out of his mind. He's working his butt off, and he is maybe going to play himself into a draft pick. I don't know where he stands next to all these other big men because it's a big man heavy class, but maybe he will have that opportunity to be in the league. That wouldn't have happened. Kofi comes in. So I think that was a good decision by Cal, but it is completely different. But I do want one more thing, and we can get to Indiana because I know Connor's chomping at the bit to get your opinion.
I've got some Kentucky questions as well too. I want to join in.
Okay, I'll go. Torres, I know you're a big proponent on the transfers as opposed to the actual recruiting. Is there any? I've thought about this. This is more of a take from the beginning of the year, but it's kind of showing its head again. The guards that came through the transfer portal, it's kind of hit and miss still. The big men are fine. The big men, they can get themselves going, but the guards, they seem to struggle a little bit. Now, Severe Wheeler and KD Johnson are two, weirdly enough, they both played for Tom Crean last year, are two outliers. But you see guys like Remy Martin at Kansas, who I'll admit he's injured, but before his injury, he wasn't doing well. Xavier Johnson at IU, he's starting to pick it up a bit, but at the beginning of the year, he was not ready to go at all. There's still that risk and reward, but do you think that is a completely bad take? Am I an idiot for bringing that up?
Well, no, I don't. I think recruiting transfers is no different than recruiting high school players. It is still about evaluation.
Yeah.
It is still about fit. And it is, by the way, something that I think we're going to see more and more of. I think it's about, in many cases, I think we think of transfers as immediate plug and play guys, and they
Right.
are. But, and maybe this doesn't really pertain to Kentucky, but I think part of it is projection as well. And so I'll give you an example. Arkansas right now, Eric Musselman's been as aggressive in the portal as anybody. Their leading scorer is a guy named J.D. Note, who by technicality is a transfer, but he transferred 3 years ago. He actually did sit out the last year that you had to sit out, played last year as a sixth man, and now he's an all-SEC caliber player. And so that's transfer recruiting, but it's a different kind of transfer recruiting where it's not plug and play like Kellen Grady, like Severe Wheeler, like whatever. And I do think with Kentucky, it's a little bit different because everybody comes to Kentucky thinking they're going to leave in a year, whether it's as a transfer, whether it's as a high school player, whatever. With my stance on Kentucky is just, I do think that, and I think Calipari gets this, but I don't know that like he fully accepts it and embraces it. Like his number one job is to do what puts Kentucky basketball in the best position to win the most games possible. And I think what Calipari wants is to be the one and done guy, to say that I signed the most number one recruiting classes, to say that I had the most NBA draft picks, and figure out a way along the way to win. Now, I also think there's an element to that of if you recruit at a high enough level, if you have high enough draft picks, then they're going to help you win in college. But I think the problem with Kentucky that we've talked about on this podcast many times is if you don't get those 3 to 4 true difference makers coming out of the high school ranks, you end up with guys that are not those guys, right? And then you have that weird thing where you have to play a freshman because of draft projection, because of whatever, and they're not good enough. And then if you don't play them, they transfer. And so, to me, I believe John Calipari's number one job is to win as many games as he can at Kentucky. And I believe that right now, the best avenue for him to do that is through the transfer portal, where you get a Kellen Grady who's 24, and his ceiling might not be NBA All-Star. He might be pretty darn close to his ceiling. But that ceiling is still a guy that can get you 17 points a game in the SEC. Whereas you might bring in a Tyler Hero, or you might bring in a Keldon Johnson. You might bring in somebody from high school. You might bring in somebody that didn't work out like BJ Boston, where it's going to be kind of cool if BJ Boston someday becomes an NBA All-Star. But do you think Kentucky fans are really going to care? Or are they going to say, why wasn't he that guy when he was here? As opposed to Kellen Grady, who may never play a minute in the NBA, but if he's the second leading scorer on a national championship team or a Final Four team, he'll be remembered fondly. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is I think there's a couple things here. Is one, recruiting transfers is no different than recruiting high school players in terms of projection. Are they a 1-year fit? Are they a 3-year? Like CJ Frederick at Kentucky is not a one and done transfer player, so it's a little bit different. But then at the same time, I also do think from Calipari's perspective, his job is to win as many games as possible. And I think with the way the transfer rules are now, that is going to give him a chance to win the most games possible. I don't think he's going to commit to that because I think at the end of the day, one, he likes being able to say, I signed number one recruiting classes. I put this many guys in the league. But I also do think there's an element too, if you hit on the right high school guys, their ceiling as players, even at the college level, is higher. Say a Paulo Banchero this year, say even a Ty Washington this year, say a Cade Cunningham last year, et cetera. So that's a long-winded way of me saying I still believe if I was in Cal's ear, I would say, okay, like if you can get me a Paulo, if you can get me if I was Calipari, let me put it this way, and I'll wrap the question, I promise. I'd probably give out a maximum of 5 scholarship offers a year to high school players. That's it.
Yeah.
And if I don't get them, then that's cool. I find somebody in the portal. So that's the answer to the question. I hope that made a little bit of sense.
No, definitely. Connor, you had some questions about Kentucky.
I'm curious. You guys are talking about Kofi and Oscar. Say they are on the same team right now. Who starts? Knowing everything you guys know about Oscar this year and Kofi this year, who would you start?
I mean, I think it's got to be Kofi. I think what Oscar's doing is, and by the way, maybe that's why they don't have Kofi, because as good as Oscar was at West Virginia, maybe he was way better than we realized at the time. But I mean, Kofi's got 4 inches on Oscar, and I think that just changes the dynamic of who you like. If there's a weakness to Kentucky and it hasn't really been exposed since the Duke game on opening night. It's, they're not super lengthy and athletic up front. And so if they do play a Duke with Mark Williams and Paolo, if they do play a Gonzaga potentially with Chet Holmgren, there's going to be plays that Oscar just can't make because he's only 6'9". And even the Auburn game, if I remember correctly, Oscar statistically didn't have like a crazy game. It was actually the guards that were playing really well early. So I actually think it's Kofi. I think it's probably not really a debate. And then it's just, what are you kind of getting from Oscar off the bench? Is he the confident, smiley guy that he is now, or is his confidence battered because he came to Kentucky to be who he is right now and he never got that opportunity? By the way, I think it was a really smart move by Calipari not to take him. I was in the minority when that happened. I said, I don't think you should take him. And oh, by the way, we can talk about it if you want. I don't think Calipari should play Shaedon Sharpe right now for the exact same reason. And so yeah.
Yeah,
so
let's move. We can move that up the outline. Yeah.
We talked about that. Sam wants him to play, kind of. I think deep down, Sam wants him to play.
I don't know.
I think there's a big risk reward. Like, okay, I laid it out for Sam, basically every possible scenario. He plays this year, things go well, doesn't move the needle for them, is basically how I phrased it. Because if he plays well, I think he's gone. Like, I think he leaves because his draft stocks just stay the same or get better. If he plays bad, then you're kind of disappointed as a fan, and you're almost like, okay, maybe he's not as good as he thought. And I don't know. Then that's disappointing. I just know. What do you think, Sam? Do you think Sam, as a Kentucky fan, should want him to play, or do you think he should want him to not play and wait until next year?
So I think I understand the element of, I get a Kentucky fan that's like, if we're going to get 0 games, if we do not play him and we get 0 games out of him, I'm going to be pissed. And I'm going to be especially pissed if we lose in the Sweet 16 and we had a top 10 pick on our bench. I get that element of it 100%. And I'm a fan, I get where you're coming from. What I would also say is basketball is a game that I don't know if you guys have heard this. There's only one ball. And there's only so many minutes to go around. This isn't football where you can rotate 11 5-star defensive linemen. Like, that's not how this works. And so it's the same reason I think they made the right decision not taking Kofi. Now, if they didn't have Oscar, then yeah, you take Kofi. It's not like I'm anti-talent guy, but the pieces have to fit. And I'll tell you, like, a program that I'm sure you guys have talked about, like Memphis. I truly don't believe Penny Hardaway is a terrible coach. What I don't believe that Penny Hardaway understands is that basketball is it's a team game, that chemistry matters. And when you bring in 2 5-stars in the middle of the summer, after your guys have been grinding all summer long, working out at 6 a.m, and you bring in 2 5-stars and you just think, oh, it's going to be it'll be great. We just signed 2 5-stars. It's like, yeah, there's 11 other guys that are pissed off in that locker room. And so the Shaedon Sharpe deal is a little bit different because he's been on campus. He knows the guys. They're not forcing him in. But I think we all agree. We've all seen the YouTube highlights. Maybe you guys have seen him in person. I actually don't think I have seen him in person. But he needs the ball in his hands to be effective. And so when he has the ball in his hands, if Severe Wheeler's healthy, what does that do for him? What does that do for Ty Washington? How many fewer shots for Kellen Grady does that mean when Kellen Grady's shooting 46% from 3 or whatever? And so if there are injuries, or if the team goes in a slump, or if Severe Wheeler, another screen doesn't get called out and he gets his head knocked off, which I'm not joking about, but like, it's happened twice now, it's a different conversation. But to me, this is a chemistry game. And for the same reason that Kofi looks great on paper, but what does it mean for Oscar? What does it mean for Lance Ware? What does it mean for Keon Brooks, who just played the game of his life at Fog Allen Fieldhouse? Well, it's the same with Shaedon Sharpe. It looks great on paper to just plug in Shaedon Sharpe to the lineup. But how many fewer touches is that for Severe Wheeler, who's leading the SEC in assists yet again? How many fewer wide open threes is that for Kellen Grady? How many times is a Severe Wheeler pass hitting Kellen Grady in the corner for a wide open 3 that now Shaedon Sharpe, not used to the speed of college basketball, is throwing over his head or 6 inches to the side? Now he doesn't catch in his stride. Now it's a miss, whatever. I just think it sounds great on paper, but I don't know. There's only so many guys you can play. They have a nice 6-7 man rotation, 8-man rotation, whatever. I say it all the time. This is college basketball. You really shouldn't play more than 7 or 8 guys. It's Memphis's problem right now. I think it's what Tennessee's problem is right now. When I came on your spaces, I thought it was a little bit of an Indiana problem that seems to have sorted itself out over the last couple of weeks. You don't need to play 11 guys. And I just think you bring in Shaedon Sharpe with this particular roster. And oh, by the way, here's the other thing. If we just agreed to start this show that Kentucky's a top 5 team that could win the national championship, it doesn't change your ceiling. It'd be one thing if you were a fringe top 25 team and you just went to Auburn and got your brains beat in at full strength, and you're like, man, we just need some more pop to this lineup. You guys were in control. Not you guys, Connor, because you hate Kentucky, but you guys, Sam, were in control at Auburn, the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's where it's different. And I get the element of, first of all, things can always change. Injuries can happen. 3-game losing streak can happen, whatever. And I get the element of a fan that's like, dude, if we're going to lose them anyway, whatever. But here's the flip side. If you're going to lose them anyway and you make a Final Four or you win a national championship, I don't know that I care. If you're in 6th place and you're struggling to make the NCAA tournament, that's a different deal. And I think Calipari would feel the same way. So that's my thought. And I keep saying, I keep going around and answering the question, then coming back. But that's my answer to that question.
No, so I said that in the last recording pre-Kansas. So This was when Ty was a question mark. When Severe, he was still kind of banged up.
But once you play him, you can't not play him. That's the problem.
That's
it's not
true.
like you can just plug him in at Kansas if Ty Washington's hurt for 28 minutes and then just not play him the rest of the season.
I had no expectations of him going in against Kansas. I think if he was going to play, I think the game he would have played was in that Mississippi State game when we were down to Dante Allen and that weird lineup that we had in with Kellen Grady at the point guard. But I don't look. I think the worst possible scenario is getting no games out of Shaedon. I think that is the worst possible scenario.
I vehemently disagree. The worst case scenario is he comes in and screws up all the chemistry.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. Yes. Okay. All right.
Or worst case scenario number 2. The real worst case scenario is that you finally have some momentum back on the recruiting trail. He comes in and he sucks, and he screws up your chemistry, and then his draft stock plummets. And then the next time Duke is in the same house that Kentucky is, they're like, look at what they just did to Shaedon Sharpe. Is that really where you want to go? That's actually the worst case scenario.
There's so many negatives.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah, there's so many negatives to playing him versus not playing him.
Post-Kansas game,
Kentucky fans are so confident. Why would you mess up what you have?
Post-Kansas game, my stance changed. I will say this. I haven't talked to you about it, but it did change because I saw the chemistry this team had. They're a really good cohesive unit. And I think adding in a guy like that who, like Torres said, he needs the ball in his hands. He's a scorer at heart. I think that'll definitely mess up the chemistry. The only thing I had pre-Kansas game was the lack of depth we had at the guard position. It was kind of rearing its ugly head, and it was a very like snap decision. And my part, I was like, well, why is he not playing? Why is he not playing? Look, I get it. In Cal, we trust definitely. He's made some decisions at the time.
By the way, it's amazing how that flipped. Like in Cal, we trust. That wasn't the conversation a year ago.
Yeah.
And I'll say this on the pod. I won't put it out on social media because I don't want to offend anybody. But I was thinking how funny it is with social media. Mm-hmm. A year ago, I would wonder if on January 31st, 2021, if we were recording this show, and if I had put on a post on social media, a little poll, if you will, and I said, Kentucky fans, you can trade John Calipari for Nate Oates today. No questions asked. Just literally, John Calipari steps away, Nate Oates steps in. I would love to know the percentage that would have taken that at this time last year, as opposed to at this time this year, 2022, where Sam Wrench, in Calipari we trust. In Calipari we trust. I can find the mentions where I had the whole list of candidates, not from you, Sam, but from other Kentucky fans. We need to call this guy. We can't wait. And by the way, I love Nate Oates, and I think he's a great coach, but like everybody else, he's struggling. By the way, Bruce Pearl, who Louisville, they were ready to name the KFC Yum Center after him if he was going to come. Bruce Pearl, really struggled last year. So it's just funny how all these narratives work, and the whole in Cal we trust. Like, did I have my doubts at this time last year? I did, but it's just so funny to me where it's like, how many Kentucky fans would trade 8 Oates for Calipari today? Forget just this season, for the next 10 years. I don't know how many would.
I wasn't that far off the bandwagon. I wasn't ready to fire Cal. I was not ready. I was never at that point. I was disappointed in him. And you're wearing the KSR shirt. You worked there for years. You understand how crazy Kentucky fans are.
Well,
a high percentage would have said
it's an interesting conversation you bring this up because, during the Woodson hire and everything, IU fans are crazy. We always want to fire our coach, blah, blah, blah.
Good transition.
We get a bad rap. Like, we're the crazy ones. Like, the fan base is toxic. Why would any coach want to go there? Kentucky wanted to fire Cal. Like, IU wants to fire coaches because they don't make the tournament, or they're like Crean and they just have a total drop off. Cal brings you championships, Anthony Davis, Bam, Malik Monk, one bad year, and it's like everything's off the rails. Like, come on. What are we doing?
Level of crazy. It's a different level of
just
crazy
insane
at Bloomington. I will admit that.
Well, no, but I'll say too is that I do think that, so look, I always say, like, as long as we play college basketball, somebody's going to want to coach Indiana, somebody's going to want to coach Duke, somebody's going to want to coach Kentucky. I do think if that, let's say that had happened, or even let's say Kentucky was bad this year, again, like last year, and it was clear that it wasn't working out. And it was clear, like, I do think that would be a negative, where I think there's a lot of coaches that would be like, that dude made how many Final Fours, how many Elite Eights, how many Sweet 16s, basically had them in contention every single year. And they just ran him out of town after 2 bad years. Now, the second year, it's a little bit different. I would get that if that was a hypothetical. But I do think that would be a negative. I'll also say this, and I tweeted this, and maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. But, like, I think Saturday just proved, like, there's, like, you talk about Calipari we trust. Like, I don't think there will ever be in my lifetime a coach better equipped for the Kentucky job than Calipari, where literally in an offseason, everything goes to, excuse my language, everything goes to shit last year. And in like a 6-week period, he's just like, yeah, I'm going to change my entire staff. I'm going to flip my entire roster. I'm going to change the entire way that I play. And then 6 months later, they're winning at Fog Allen Fieldhouse by 25 points. And I say this all the time, but it's like, there's a scenario where, if, down the road, if whoever is available, like, there could be a guy that's a better X's and O's guy. There could be a guy that's a better player development guy. There could be a guy that has just as big of a personality, but the way he handles the media, the way he understands everything that we talked about a minute ago, that you do have to sign the number 1 ranked recruiting class every year. You do have to put players in the NBA. And, oh, by the way, you got to win in college. Like, I just don't think I don't think Kentucky fans in this moment fully appreciate what he's doing on a year in, year out basis. And you know where we're going to see it? We're going to see it everywhere else in college basketball, where all of a sudden with this one-time transfer rule, now it is a sport where everyone's got to flip their roster every single year. And let's see how other people handle it. Let's see how Tony Bennett, who's probably going to miss the tournament, handles it. Let's see how guys like that handle it. Mick Cronin has a veteran roster. I love UCLA, but he's going to have a team full of freshmen next year. Let's see if he has them back in the top 10 ready to compete for a national championship. But just the way he handles everything. And then you look at how Chris Mack melted down in the spotlight, how Penny Hardaway's melting down. I just don't think we fully appreciate, like, what this guy's doing year in and year out is freaking insane. And to Connor's point, it's like, that's the insanity of the fan base. And he just kind of brushed, like, literally just people just crapping on him for 4 straight months, calling for his job. And he just kind of brushed, oh yeah, let me shake up my staff. I'll go get a few new coaches. We'll just change our entire style of play. And here we are. They win by 22 at Fog Allen, or 18 or whatever it was, and nobody even thinks it's a big deal.
No, yeah, it's insane. Like, you look at the snapshot of him when he first accepted the job to him now. He has aged 40 plus years since he's taken the job, and it has no short. Like, it is all from the fan base.
But publicly, he doesn't let it get to him, though. Publicly, right. You can criticize him for a lot last year. But he said all the right things after the season. Now, I don't know if he believed everything that he said. I don't know if he was really like, I can't believe these fans are acting the way that they are. But what I can say is, like, he said all the right things. We need to play different. We need to coach different. We need to recruit different. I hope he got us now, because we're going to look different next year. Now, what I'll also say is he plays the other side game really well as well, where you better believe come, I don't know, April 15th or so, when it's time for a contract raise, all of a sudden, there's just going to be a random, the Charlotte Hornets are going to need a new head coach, and their number one candidate is John Calipari. You better watch out. It's like Jim Harbaugh right now. It's like, Harbaugh, dude, nobody wants you in the NFL. Just go back to Michigan. We get it. You proved your point. Take your raise and go back. And trust me, Cal will do the same thing, even though whatever a lifetime contract is, I know he already has one. He's going to get another one. It's like when they sentence a murderer to 2 lifetime sentences. That's going to be Calipari by April. He's going to have 2 lifetime contracts. Be paying him after he's in the grave.
No, you mentioned it.
He's going bankrupt. He's 30 days from going bankrupt. So
he's 30 days from it. I could not believe he said
that. Was funny.
What did he say? I missed that. I saw like a headline, but I didn't click it.
He said he feels bad for Chris Mack because every coach in the business is 30 days from being bankrupt.
Yeah, that's a weird thing to say. Well, Chris Mack was living his best life on Sunday watching that Cincinnati Bengals game.
He was. Yeah.
I'd be pissed if I was a Louisville fan, but whatever.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things to be pissed about. They're numb at this point. All right, let's talk. Okay, we talked a lot about Kentucky. This is going to be a Kentucky-heavy episode. I hope our listeners, there's a lot of Indiana guys.
We can talk Indiana too.
Let's talk. Connor, I'll let you take the Indiana a little bit.
All right. Well, it's kind of been a bad day because the PA announcer retired.
Oh, I saw that.
Think about this. Since 1936, let me get the date right on this. Since 1936, there have been 2 PA announcers at Indiana.
Wow.
If only their coaches, could be like that. If only could keep.
So when had this guy been there since?
He had been here. It was his 45th year this year. So he was through the Bob Knight era.
70s, yeah.
So, but anyway, look, I posted
that Michigan game put him to a grave. He was like, I can't do this anymore. He's like,
it's kind of like the last game. You're really gonna end up like, I would have like, come on, the Illinois game to win that one. Should have ended after the Purdue game. Should have just been like, all right.
Yeah, he should have dropped the mic, walked out.
I posted a poll today. We're talking about Ohio State being ranked. Maybe they shouldn't be ranked. IU's not ranked again. Probably, they have losses that prevent them from the Penn State one. Just can't even get that one out of my head, especially when you beat them by 25 the next time you play them. But, they're outside the top 25. I think they're right there. I think that when you look at the Big Ten, again, I know it's crazy to talk about. They're 2 bad losses against Wisconsin and Penn State from being number 1 in the Big Ten.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Big Ten. Like they're a game and a half back. And if they win both those games, they're in first. Do you think they're that close, or do you think this is just kind of the standings kind of misleading us as fans? I don't know if they're that close. I honestly don't. So I'm kind of curious for both of your guys' opinions.
Oh, that's a good question. Listen, I'll say this, and I swear this is going to sound like an insult to Indiana, but it's not. I just don't think the top of the Big Ten is that good this year. Like, I really don't. Like, there's been years where, like, the Big Ten gets to the NCAA tournament, they lose some game. Oh, the Big Ten was always overrated. Like, I don't think the Big Ten was overrated last year. Like, I think Iowa was really good and Illinois was really good. This year, I mean, Illinois has some weird losses. Kofi's been in and out of the lineup, whatever. Purdue, I mean, we all watched the Ohio State game. They're up 20. They almost lose. So I would say that in terms of independent of wins, losses, standings, this, standings, that, I would say to me, they are closer to the Purdues, who they already beat, by the way, to Illinois, Wisconsin. To your point, Connor, they probably should have beaten. Like, if they play that Wisconsin game now instead of in the middle of December, whenever they played it, like, if you go up 22, I don't think that team is losing that game at this time in the year. So I think they're more towards the top of the Big Ten than they are the bottom of the Big Ten, whoever that would be, Northwestern. I don't even know who's bad this year. But I don't think the top of the Big Ten is as good, but I don't think that's an insult, right? So I think they're really good. And I think, to your point, it's time to start talking about them as probably one of the 25 to 30 best teams in the country. Now, you have to win the games that you're supposed to. And I forget, I think, what is it, Northwestern and Illinois this week? I forget all the details. you got to win those games. But no, I've seen definite improvement from this team. And obviously right now they're not 100% without Finney. But I think there's no doubt that I've seen improvement from them. And then just the question is, can you close out the games that you have to? Can you not have a letdown against a game like Penn State? But I do think they're probably closer to the top of the Big Ten than they are the middle or the bottom.
When you go back to those two games, I've talked about it with Sam. There's been a debate for a while now if they should change their starting lineup. And Trey Galloway's been like a revelation since he came back. He got hurt in the St. John's game. And ever since he's came back, he's been phenomenal for them. He didn't play in the Wisconsin game. He didn't play in the Penn State game. So that's just things that are keeping the IU fans going. Like you said, you're right. They play Illinois at home, and then they go to Northwestern. They have Wisconsin at home, and then they've got at Michigan State and at Ohio State. So this is like the time where they're going to figure out really who they are. I'm curious, Sam, for your biased.
Oh, my bias. You want my bias or unbiased?
Give me your bias. I don't know. You're pretty fair sometimes.
I'm a fair. No, I'll be fair. I'll be fair. I think this Indiana team, it's a lot different than last year because I think Race Thompson he's actually hitting threes now. He's hitting jump shots. He's actually stretching the floor a little bit. You have what seems to be a lot more depth than last year. You have a lot more options to go with. So I think it's a tournament team. This team is a tournament team. Absolutely. So check that off. I said good thing about Indiana. I think they are, like Torres said, I think the Big Ten at the top. I've already said what I think about Michigan State. I don't know if Michigan State is all that. Illinois, they don't have Iowa. I haven't been high on them since the beginning of the year. They're probably closer to Illinois than people think. And I think Wisconsin, they're so reliant on one player that I think when does Wisconsin come to Bloomington? Do they come to Bloomington?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in a couple weeks, I think.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, there you go. February 15th, I have it written down. I think they win that game. I think they have as good a chance of any to win that game. It's just Purdue. They beat them, but Assembly Hall is a crazy place. Mike Woodson's first year. Who knows? But I will say this. I think they are a top. I think they're a top 4 team in the Big Ten. I think it is. I don't know who you take off of that between.
I think it could be.
Yeah, between like Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan State. I'd probably take.
I think
Michigan
they're better
State
than Ohio State.
Indiana. Yeah,
I think they're better than Ohio State too.
I
think those two teams. Like, I don't think that's really unfair to say.
I see a lot of Wisconsin or Ohio State and Wisconsin. I see a lot of similarities in relying on one player to do a lot of dirty work. But that's kind of my opinion.
You guys a question?
What's up?
Are we sure? Like I always hear like Chris Holtman's this awesome coach. I think he's okay. I don't like the team never. Like I don't know. They never do anything for me. I don't think he's bad. Like I don't think he's like should be fired. But it's like like the Louisville job opens up and like that would not be a bad hire for Louisville. Like if you can get the Ohio State coach, but I don't know. It's just they're kind of the same team every year. And I know last year they had Dwayne Washington. Maybe they were a little bit better, but like they were fine. Like what is this, year 5, year 6 for him in the Big Ten? Like they're fine. I don't know. I've never, and I'm trying to think. Maybe he had some teams that I'm just blanking on. But it's like some of these guys just get this reputation as like, like. And I remember even like when Shaka was at VCU before he went to Texas, and Shaka's been awesome at Marquette. I was probably a little bit wrong on him. But like Shaka made the Final Four in 2011. I think he left VCU in like 2017 or 2018. He won one NCAA tournament game after the Final Four run at VCU. And I understand it's VCU, all that stuff. But like, it was like, and people were like, oh yeah, Shaka. And I'm like, he's won one NCAA tournament game in like 6 years. Can we not put him on a list of the top 4 coaches in college basketball? And I just feel like it's kind of the same with Chris Holtman is like, I think he's fine. I think he's whatever. I think he'd be a great hire for Louisville, and I don't think he's going to Louisville. But like, you talk about like really good coach. Like I think and I know he's a buddy of mine, so I don't. But like, I think what Eric Musselman's done at Arkansas in a 2.5-year period is significantly more impressive than what Chris Holtman's done. Bruce Pearl, I know, the FBI stuff, but like Bruce Pearl's been unbelievable at Auburn. And especially, like, I'll give you an example. I think what Andy Enfield has done at USC is like significantly more impressive than anything Chris Holtman has done at Ohio State. But if you ask the average fan to be like, oh my God, Chris Holtman, I mean, look at that resume. And it's like, I don't know. So I don't know.
No, I'll do you one better. I think there's this stigma around a coach that just makes one run in the tournament. You see, Brad Stevens had 2. Chris Holtman had the one at Butler. Shaka Smart had the one at VCU. You mentioned all these guys. I'm blanking on somebody. I had someone.
Mike Woodson's going to have one this year. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. There you go. But there's this stigma that they are a great coach. So when they get hired, they can do no wrong. And people it's like they get the job and then people just forget about them. And when they see them, it's just like, oh yeah, they're a good coach. It's like this psychological thing with some of these coaches. And I agree. Look, Chris Holtman is probably on the short list for if Cal ever leaves, Kentucky's going to kick the tires on him for sure.
You did, apparently.
Yeah, you did.
He declined, apparently.
Oh, did he?
Apparently, he was like no interest in that. They said this on the broadcast, though. They're talking about how Holtman like wins the coach of the year every conference he's in. I was like, I think he just overachieves when he picks up a team that's been down for a couple of years and they have a good year.
Yeah.
And he wins coach of the year and surprises everybody. And then he's just kind of.
Yeah. What he did at Butler was pretty legitimate. I mean, he like the head coach after Brad Stevens like resigned a week before the season and Holtman took over and they didn't miss a beat. But like, and you get a huge payday to go to Ohio State. And listen, we know the reality. Ohio State just make the tournament. Nobody really cares. But I just feel like when we talk national college basketball, it's like, oh my God, look at what Chris Holtman's doing with Ohio State. And like, even Sam, you'll remember this, and I don't mean to make it back into a Kentucky segment, but the year that Kentucky lost them in Vegas, I was at that game. They were number 1 in the country. And by like middle of February, they weren't even ranked in the top 25. So maybe that's what it is. Like there was that year a few years ago where they went all the way up to number 1. And then by the end of the season, they weren't even ranked. Last year, at one point, they were obviously top 5 when they played Michigan. End of the season, I believe they didn't even finish in the top 4 of the Big Ten. So I guess maybe that's fair. Like I think he's fine. I just don't I don't know. So
I mean, they lost to Oral Roberts in the first round last year. There you go. Like, and they had a damn good roster last year. Dwayne Washington, we don't want to harp on Ohio State, but yeah, that's completely true. And I think I would be wary if I'm Kentucky post Cal. But back to IU, yes, I think Indiana definitely better than Ohio State, better than most people think. Definitely tournament caliber team, but that's also in my bias. I'll bring some bias out. Big Ten, definitely not as good as
good.
SEC.
It's not good. Well, hold on. I'll get okay. We have this conversation every year. Auburn's the best team, but I think Kentucky probably now. I mean, Auburn and Kentucky, whatever.
Okay.
The only thing as a Big Ten fan is I question like the teams after those two. Like Tennessee I don't know how you guys feel about Tennessee. Sam, you always call them frauds. Like you hate Rick Barnes and have been trashing on him ever since he got there. But other than that, like Alabama's been really up and down. Like they've got really good wins, really bad losses. Arkansas's picked it up again. It's interesting when you look at the conference as a whole, not just the top. It's kind of like that Big 12 conversation back in the day when it was just Kansas and Oklahoma, and then everybody else kind of sucked.
Yeah.
I'll say this for the SEC is that I do think after now it's just the top 2. I mean, LSU I thought was pretty good, and then they had a million injuries, but then they were fully at full strength the other day against TCU and lost. So I still think LSU's one that could get right and be really good, and I think Arkansas is figuring it out. But Alabama's totally hit or miss. I'm with you guys on Tennessee. So I kind of agree with Connor there, and I've been the SEC. I've really kind of pushed them. I think that the conference is really good, but I do think you get past the first 2, it's like you can poke holes in pretty much. You can even poke holes to a degree in Kentucky. I mean, they basically have 2 losses at full strength, but they did lose to Notre Dame, a team that's currently, as we speak, getting smoked by Duke, by the way. But they could come back and win. So. Yeah, 14 points at the half.
I agree. I just think, look, there's a lot of potential in these SEC schools, and I think that's what I'm seeing in all these teams. I think Arkansas has about as good as potential as anybody in that conference. They just started off really bad. Alabama obviously can beat anybody, has one of the weirdest yin and yang resumes of all time. So, yeah, I think I just see the full potential in that conference, and I think there could be a lot of teams playing in the second weekend. So, that's kind of my deal. All right, let's do some national stuff, and then we're going to let you go because I know we're kind of cutting against the clock. I love these long interviews, but let's talk a little bit about the West Coast teams. You're our LA guy. You're out there in California. So just last week, there was a big game between UCLA and Arizona. UCLA prevailed. But for our people in the Midwest that don't stay up long enough to watch the Pac-12, that don't stay up long enough to, or probably can't even watch Gonzaga, provided what TV provider they have, who is the team to beat in the West Coast right now?
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to know by the end of this week, at least in the Pac-12. Arizona is actually hosting UCLA on Thursday. I'm actually going to that game. I've never been to Tucson before, so I'm excited. Yeah, I'm actually leaving tomorrow. Going to hit up some practices and stuff. So I'll say this is that it's weird because two completely different styles. Like Arizona has the Tommy Lloyd, Gonzaga, and what's kind of crazy is both coaches inherited a roster that's perfect for how they want to play. Like Sean Miller, essentially, and literally, this is not even disputable. Like he couldn't recruit American kids because of the FBI allegations and stuff. And so at one point, he's just like, well, damn, like I'm gonna have to go international. Now he has all these international kids who are awesome. They play kind of the pace and space, all that stuff. And so I bring it up because is that they play kind of this fast-paced Euro Gonzaga style basketball. And last Tuesday against UCLA was really the first time that somebody just straight up punked them. Like they were just like, we're not letting you get to the rim. We're not letting you, if you get here, we're going to foul. And they just had no answers and they got shook. So I think this is going to be an interesting test for them. UCLA is obviously the exact opposite. Mick Cronin kind of inherited a perfect situation for him as well. Steve Alford signed a lot of players that were really kind of what Kentucky dealt with the last few years, like players that were pretty highly ranked, good high school players, but not future NBA stars. And so they're now 3-4 year college players where Cody Riley's in his 5th year of college basketball. Jules Bernard's a 4th year college basketball player. David Singleton's 4th year college basketball player. Tiger Campbell's 4th year college basketball player. All those guys were inherited from Steve Alford. Jaime Jaquez was committed to Steve Alford and basically was just like, I'm hanging on to this scholarship. I'm showing up the first day, whether you guys want me or not. I don't know if Cronin, how much they even really recruited him, but they obviously honored his scholarship. And now he's an all Pac-12 kind of player. Maybe they did want him. I have no idea. But, he was kind of like a fringe top 100 recruit. So it's worked out really well. They have those distinct styles. I do think those are probably two of the 5-6 best teams in the country. I always thought UCLA was really good. I never bought the narrative that they had only made a run in the NCAA tournament because don't forget last year they were actually picked to win the Pac-12. Then their best player, Chris Smith, got hurt. Then they had to figure out how to do everything through Johnny Juzang. And then they returned by the time they figured it out, it was tournament time. And then they returned that entire course. So I think those two teams are really good. Gonzaga, I hate to say it, it's kind of the same deal. Is they're going to run through the WCC. They play at BYU this weekend. That might be a loss because BYU is a really, really tough place to play. But it's going to come down to what happens in the tournament, what happens when they get to those games that matter, what happens when they get to a Final Four, can they compete for another national championship? And if they get there, do they get embarrassed like they did last year with Baylor? Like I feel bad for Gonzaga because, last year people say, oh, they were overrated all along. They beat USC by 20 in the Elite Eight, okay? Like they were not overrated all along. It just so happened that there was one team that was better than them. Sometimes, as you guys know, you don't even play the teams. The best teams don't always even make it to the Final Four national championship game. It just so happened the two best teams got there, and Baylor absolutely destroyed them. And so I feel bad for Gonzaga, but they're going to be defined by can they get to that Monday night and can they eventually win that game? I don't know if this is the team to do it. But I like those teams. And then after that, I would say out west, there's a pretty big drop-off. The Mountain West has a lot of good NCAA tournament caliber teams. I think Boise's pretty good. They actually have a bunch of high major transfers. Yeah, Colorado State is pretty good. In the Pac-12, USC is fine. You really look at their resume, they really don't have great wins. Now, they, like UCLA, are going to be playing at Arizona this weekend, so they'll have an opportunity to earn them. But I think USC is like a good, 5-6 seed of the tournament, but they don't really have a resume. Like, they're, I think, ranked in the top 20 right now. But if you really look at their wins and losses, they don't have a ton of great wins. So to me, it's UCLA and Arizona. I think they're both really, really, really good. Then there's a big drop off. USC, Oregon's had its moments, but they've had their ebbs and flows as well. Outside of the Pac-12, I do think Gonzaga's really good, but we know what they're going to be defined by. Mountain West, kind of the same deal. A couple of really nice teams, but I will say I think overall the play on the West Coast is better. And this is the first time in a few years that I think there's legitimate national championship contenders on the West Coast that are good enough to cut down the net. I mean, listen, Gonzaga's been there. UCLA has had their moments, but like there's 3 teams that I wouldn't be shocked if they won the national championship.
Sure. Is Gonzaga ever going to leave the WCC? Like, what's your opinion on that? Because I know, like you just said, they basically run through their conference every year. They scheduled a brutal non-conference schedule this year.
Yeah.
Is it going to matter in the tournament? Do they just end up leaving the conference?
So I don't think so for 2 reasons. One, first of all, the Pac-12, Gonzaga doesn't have football, right, so it'd be kind of a weird fit because everyone says just go to the Pac-12. It's like, well, there's not a football. They don't have a football team, so whatever. And the other thing is, like, I hate to say it, like Mark Few kind of runs that conference. Like whatever, like what people don't understand. I say this all the time is, first of all, those are really hard jobs if you're not Gonzaga and BYU is leaving here in a couple of years for the Big 12. Gonzaga is basically a Power 5, Power 6 school in a mid-major league. I mean, there is nothing that an ACC or Big 10 or Big 12 or SEC school has that Gonzaga doesn't have. As a matter of fact, I know for certain that Gonzaga's facilities, the way they travel, the hotels, they're better than probably everybody in the Pac-12 except for Arizona. Arizona is A++, but Gonzaga's right there. And so few years ago, Mark Few thought it was they went from 18 conference games to 16 conference games because Mark Few thought it was hurting his team to play so they changed the schedule that way. As you said, Connor, they can schedule pretty much whoever they want out of conference now. Duke, whoever. It's not a bad loss if you lose to Kentucky, to lose to Gonzaga. They played Kansas in the out of conference last year. They played West Virginia. They can get these big neutral court games. They've been in the Maui Invitational. They've been in the Battle for Atlantis. So I don't think they leave. What I do think they probably need to try to do, and I think they are trying to do it, I do think getting some high-profile out-of-conference games later in the year, I don't know how easy it is. I know last year, I know for certain they were rolling through everybody, and they tried to schedule a few teams late in the season. I know they tried to schedule Houston late in the season when obviously Houston ended up being a Final Four team, but they couldn't get it done. And I do think getting more marquee out-of-conference opponents in late season would probably help them, but I don't know how realistic it is. I don't know that Duke wants to take a Gonzaga or North Carolina even if it was a home game. Like, I just think, if you're competing for a conference title, if you're Indiana and you got to worry about Iowa and Wisconsin and Purdue and Ohio State, I don't know that you just want to throw in a game against Gonzaga. So I don't know how easy it is. If I could wave a magic wand and make one suggestion, that's what I would do. Because listen, I mean, it's hard, and I know I'm going long here, but it's hard to say they should leave the conference when they get a number 1 seed every year, right? If you get a number 1 seed, you're going to be in position. They've already broken through to 2 Final Fours. Now it's just a matter of, can they win that final game? Not only 2 Final Fours, 2 national championship games. And so now it's just a question of, can they win one more game? We'll see, but I'm very intrigued. I don't think they leave anytime soon. Certainly not while Mark Few is there, at least the next couple of years. But I'll say this, college sports landscape changes all the time. Maybe BYU leaving changes things from them, maybe something else, but I don't think they're in a rush right now.
Yep, that's true. Well, Aaron, thank you for coming on. I don't want to take too much of your time, but thanks for coming on. That was a lot of fun. I was happy that I could kind of talk to somebody, not Connor, because I don't think Connor likes to talk about Kentucky's success too much, but I was happy I got to talk to you about it. But
it was a good win. It was a good win. Little fluky from Keon. I will say that. I mean, I looked up the stats. In 67 career games, he only scored over 20 twice. Kansas, I mean,
Big
seriously,
player.
in the month of January, they had every single game decided by 10 points or less, except one before the Kentucky game. And they were coming off 3 straight games coming down to the last possession. I mean, something had to happen. Something had to give.
That's true.
It was good.
Well,
it was a good one.
It was good. All right. Thank you, Torres, for coming on. I hope to have you on soon again, maybe before March Madness. But good talking to you.
Speaking of which, Colorado State at Wyoming tonight. Big Mountain West battle. Big Mountain West for all your West Coast listeners. So
there you
all right,
go.
fellas. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Okay.
Yep. Good talking. I'll see you.
Yep.